Why do people turn to auctions when markets are falling? Let's explore. So first, let's consider the alternative, where markets are rising. So let's say this is our price axis and this is our time axis. When the market is rising, it's important to note that we don't actually know if it's going to continue rising. People might tell you that it is, or show you some proof that the market is going to go up or down or whatever. They don't know. Nobody knows. But there's a sense sometimes that it's inevitable. You know, maybe central banks are printing money, or in the case of Dubai, lots of people are moving to Dubai, and you can see, we get a sense sometimes that it's inevitable, but we never know. So let's say this is the price today, and this is the true market value of a particular property, as defined by the most that anyone would pay today for that property. So let's call that PT, as in true price or true value. So let's say the market does keep going up. Obviously, we don't know this in advance. From today, we don't know this, but let's say it does. What happens, particularly in Dubai, is that people will pick a high asking price. So let's call this PA for asking price. Now today, that's not going to work. That market is not going to clear. But in many cases, that seller will stand firm and they'll say, I believe that the market is going to continue increasing. Therefore, I'm going to keep this price the same, and hopefully in the future, at some point, the market will clear, a buyer will be willing to pay that amount, and the property will be sold. So let's say at this future date, let's call it today plus 3 months. This is typical, could be longer. It depends on how cheeky the asking price is. This strategy worked. It wasn't efficient, because if he really did want to sell it today, he needed to be selling it at this price. He picked something that was too high, ends up selling it in the future. Because the market was increasing, he got away with it. So let's consider the alternative. So let's say that instead of increasing, at this point today, the market actually turned and then started decreasing. Again, difficult to know at the time. You know, when things are on the up, it's hard to imagine that they would turn. And when they do turn, we don't know how long for. Let's say that this is the new case now. Obviously, we can see that if you picked a high asking price, then that's the absolute worst thing that you could do, because that property is not going to sell. And you're going to have to be playing catch up, basically. So let's say you set it here initially, and then down the line you drop it, and then you drop it again. You're trying to play catch up with the market, and not only are you not selling your property, but you're kind of telling everyone that you're not serious, and potentially even that there's something wrong with your property if you keep dropping the price like that. So we don't want to do that. What is the better thing to do in this situation? This is when people turn to auctions. And why is that? Instead of setting a price target and hoping for the best, the more rational thing to do is to pick what we call a reserve price and say, this is the absolute minimum that we would accept for the property. Hopefully, hopefully we get more. It's always the aim to get more than that, but that's the absolute minimum that we would accept. And instead of waiting, 3 months or even longer to sell this property, we're going to be holding an auction here in 3 weeks' time. So let's call this today plus 3 weeks. The auction happens, people bid, and they reveal the true market price. So let's say that is here. So yes, it has fallen. Let's call it new market price. What have we done in this situation? Well, by getting the sale done quickly, compared to a traditional sale, in a defined time frame, creating urgency around that sale, we have surfaced bidders who have competed with each other to reveal the true market price. What we've avoided is a situation where we're messing around with a high asking price that was never going to be achieved, and then we end up capitulating in 3 months' time to something much lower. So as markets turn, and in the case of Dubai, this has been 2008, 2014, COVID, the Iran war, there are moments where all of a sudden it makes more sense to do an auction. I would argue that even as the market is increasing, the strategy of picking a high asking price and hoping for the best is the wrong one. But I can see why people choose it. When the market is falling, I can't. And that is the time to really consider an auction.